Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin. Long ago, before your name had ever been whispered into the breath of time, the moon watched the earth from a distance not so far as it is today. The sky was darker then, the stars more ancient, and the world below was just beginning to wake. There were no cities, no trees, no whales swimming or children laughing, only rock, water and silence, except for the gentle hum of movement in the deep. In this early quiet, Earth spun with a rhythm all its own, but something had begun to change. A silent partner circled above, glowing faintly with borrowed light. The moon, newly born from Earth's own wounds, a scar made sacred. This moon was closer then, so close it filled half the sky, and it reached down with invisible fingers and touched the oceans that were forming below. The waters, pulled toward its gravity, lifted and leaned, rising in soft bulges that followed the moon's slow path overhead. This was the beginning of the tides. Not just movement, but memory. A conversation written in salt water. You can almost hear it if you listen. The push and pull of ocean breath, the lunar lullaby that began before breath itself. The Earth, cradling its new satellite, responded like a sleeping child, stirs at the brush of a mother's hand. The water obeyed, lifting and retreating, sculpting the coastlines, carving the early shape of the planet's face. But it was not just the land that changed, it was time itself. With every turn of the planet, every pull of the moon, the days grew longer. In those days, a day was barely 5 hours long, the Earth spinning like a top. But the moon, with its gravitational tug, slowed that spinning just enough to stretch time. Slowly, the world began to breathe deeper. The slowing of Earth's rotation, caused by the tides the moon pulled, lengthened the days, and that simple act of slowing gave life more time to become. The moon did not shout or strike, it whispered, and the earth listened, and in that stillness something new emerged. In tide pools warmed by sun and stirred by the lunar rhythm, life began its long dreaming. The earliest molecules, shaken and awakened by shifting currents, began to fold and spark, forming the first fragile beginnings of biology. Some say it was the tidal dance that rocked the cradle of life. Those repeated risings and fallings, mixing warmth with minerals, light with dark. Life needed rhythm, and the moon gave it rhythm. Without tides, the ingredients of life might have sat still and separate, unmixed and unimagined. But the moon stirred the pot, over and over, for millions of years. It was a silent choreography, gravity moving water, water touching rock, rock offering minerals, and light giving warmth. And in that swirl of chance and movement, life found its first breath. Imagine standing on a rocky shore billions of years ago, watching the ocean rise toward you, not in chaos, but in a slow inhale, drawn by a moon far larger in the sky than it is today. That moon glowed with quiet power, pulling not only the sea but something in the soul of the planet. The tide rose over jagged stone, then pulled away again, leaving behind new shapes, new textures, new possibilities. Life began in these in-between spaces, in the pools left behind, in the rhythm between flood and retreat. Perhaps even now the cells in your body remember this. They too carry salt. They too are shaped by rhythm, they too are pulled by hidden things. Every drop of blood in your veins holds the memory of the tide. You are not separate from the moon's pull, you are a tide that learned to walk. And as life grew, the moon kept its gentle hand upon the earth. The moon's gravity kept Earth's axis stable, preventing wild shifts in tilt that might have frozen or scorched the surface beyond survival. With this lunar stabilizer, seasons came into balance, climates, and the stage was set for life to expand. Trees would one day grow, oceans would teem with life, and eventually eyes would look upward toward the moon and wonder. But long before any eye had opened, the moon was already shaping the story. It was not merely a satellite, it was a sculptor, the silent guardian of life's becoming. Even now, when you stand beneath the full moon and feel something stir in your chest, it is not magic or imagination. It is memory. Deep, genetic, oceanic memory. The moon pulls the tides, yes, but it also pulls your pulse, your sleep, your dreams. In ancient times, poets wrote of lunar madness, of cycles and moods changing with the moon. And though science may explain the mechanics, the truth remains. We are moved by the moon, not metaphorically, but literally. It shifts our oceans, which shift our climates, which shape our lives. We build cities along coasts the moon once carved. We fish in tides it still pulls. We sleep under rhythms it continues to dictate. And through it all, the moon never speaks, never demands. It only pulls, gently, repeatedly, forever. What does it mean then that life on Earth began not in stillness but in movement? That the essence of life is not stability but sway? Perhaps the moon teaches us that life is not built in one direction but in repetition, in breath and rest, rise and fall, advance and retreat. The ocean follows the moon, not once but endlessly, and we too follow cycles, waking and sleeping, growing and grieving, ebb and flow. The moon does not promise a destination, only a rhythm, and in that rhythm life finds its way. We found our way, from tide pool to consciousness, from molecules to music, from silence to story. So tonight, if you find yourself restless or afraid, uncertain in the dark, look toward the moon. Know that it has been with you since before you were you. Know that it has pulled every ancestor toward the next breath. Know that without it you would not be here. And not just you, but every forest, every fish, every feather, every song. The moon touched the water, and the water woke. That is the story, that is the truth, that is the beginning. Let's drift deeper into the waters that the moon shaped, into the long tides of Earth's memory, where every wave is a page in a book written by the pull of the sky. When we think of the moon today, we often picture its surface, cold, cratered, silent. But its true work is not on its face. It is hidden in the spaces between moments, in the way the oceans pause and then begin again. The moon has always known how to wait, and while it waits, it moves everything. As life in the ancient seas began to unfold, folding proteins like origami, swimming blindly toward the light, it was the moon's gentle pull that stirred the soup. Not violently, not hurriedly, just enough. A long, soft push of time and tide curling around the earth like an unseen breath. The very structure of early life, the way cells divided, the way membranes flexed, the way light was sensed and followed, all of it existed within the rhythm of rising and falling waters. And that rhythm came from above, from that pale body hanging in the dusk. Over millions of years, the tide shaped not just shorelines, but possibilities. Where water met land and retreated again, new habitats were born. Estuaries, tidal flats, marshes, places of transition and transformation. These were not just locations, they were stages where life learned to try new forms. Fish that learned to breathe the air, crabs that scuttled across wet sand, creatures that timed their movements with the moon's pull, emerging at high tide, hiding at low. The moon was not just a clock, it was a teacher. The moon taught patience, teaching life how to wait for the right moment. It taught persistence with its tireless rising and falling. And it taught harmony, guiding every creature into a dance more ancient than memory. Even today, there are animals who live by the moon, who lay eggs only under certain phases, who migrate or mate when the tide is right. The moon is written into their instinct, carved into their blood like a soft signature from the sky. But its influence goes further than biology. The moon shaped how Earth spins and how it tilts. That tilt gives us seasons, and those seasons shape how life grows. If the moon were not there, Earth might wobble wildly, its axis tilting too far, causing extreme winters or unlivable heat. With the moon's steadying presence, Earth remains balanced, like a child held by the hand. The seasons arrive in gentle order. Spring doesn't explode but unfurls. Autumn doesn't collapse but whispers its way in. And within that steadiness, life has space to evolve, to become not just possible but beautiful. Flowers time their blooms. Animals sense the shifting light. The moon, though distant, is present in every leaf that turns toward the sun, in every bear that sleeps through the snow, in every human heart that feels the passing of time. And perhaps that's why when we feel lost or uncertain, we often look up. There's something about the moon that feels like a question we've always been trying to answer. Why does its light feel gentle, even though it is only a reflection? Why does it seem to watch us, even though it is lifeless? Perhaps it is because we carry its memory inside us, not just in the tides of our blood, but in the patterns of our behaviour. Ancient humans knew the moon long before they named it. They followed its phases to hunt, to plant, to dream. They carved its image into bone and stone, marking its rise and fall with reverence. The moon was their calendar, their mystery, their rhythm. And even now, when technology lights our cities and clocks count our seconds, the moon continues to turn the tides. It continues to guide the migration of fish, the flowering of coral, the pulse of the planet. Think of this. If the moon were to vanish, the oceans would fall into chaos. The tides would shrink, becoming driven only by the sun, still present but weaker, less precise. Coastal ecosystems would falter. Shorelines would shift. Species that depend on lunar cues would be confused. Over time, even Earth's rotation might wobble, throwing the climate into unpredictable extremes. The moon's presence is quiet, but its absence would be loud. It is the silence that holds the structure of our world. And in that silence, life has found its song. Imagine then those tide pools of early Earth, filled with new forms of life wriggling and growing under a moon so large it painted the ocean with silver light. The moon hung low then, closer than it is now, and with each century it drifted slowly away, about the width of a fingernail each year. That drift continues today, a gentle retreat that has not broken the bond. Instead, it has stretched it, like the relationship between parent and child, still connected, still shaping. The moon no longer looks as large, but its pull has not diminished. It remains a guardian, moving the seas with fingertips of gravity, and within this ancient ballet humans eventually came. We learned to count tides, to sail by lunar light, to mark time in months, moonths shaped by the moon's phases. We watched eclipses and wrote myths. We sang songs and told stories of lovers separated by day and night. We dreamed of walking on its surface, and then, one day, we did. We touched the moon, and in doing so touched the oldest part of ourselves. The moon became not just a source of tides, but a mirror for the human spirit. Its craters echoed our longing. Its phases mirrored our moods. It was both distant and intimate, cold and beloved. Still the moon pulls the ocean, still the tides come and go, still the coral spawns when the moon is full, still the birds take flight by lunar clock, still somewhere a child watches the moon and wonders why it follows them home. And still, within us, there is water pulled by the moon. Every cell in your body holds water. Every drop of that water is tugged by the moon's gravity. It is not enough to lift your hand or move your feet, but it is enough to shift the way you sleep, to alter the rhythms of your heart, to whisper to your instincts in ways you cannot hear, but deeply feel. You are not above the tides, you are made of them. So the next time you watch the ocean rise, do not see it as only a force of nature. See it as a memory, a gesture, a connection. The moon does not push the waves, it invites them, and they rise to meet it again and again, and so does life, and so do we. The tide is a lesson in devotion. The moon never tires of lifting the sea, and the sea never tires of answering. In that endless call and response, life has unfolded, not with thunder, but with patience, not with fire, but with water. And always, always under the light of a moon that never had to shout to be heard, it simply pulled, and everything followed. Now imagine the Earth without the moon, a world still turning, still orbiting the sun, yet somehow lonelier, quieter, less alive. Without the moon, the tides would shrink and soften, and the daily dance of ocean breath would lose its rhythm. The coral reefs that bloom with lunar precision would falter. The coasts that welcome the sea twice each day would dry and still. The whisper of the moon would no longer echo across the water, and something in life itself would pause, as if waiting for a song that no longer plays. But we are not in that world. We are in this one, the one shaped by a companion that never left. The one where every ripple is a reply, and every high tide a memory. The moon is still there, pulling, guiding, watching, even as it slowly drifts away. A few centimeters every year, a subtle goodbye stretched across eternity, but its influence remains, carved into every coastline, every shell, every wet footprint in the sand. And inside us the moon remains too, in our blood which mirrors the salt of the sea, in our cycles, our sleep, our emotions that wax and wane like the tides themselves. Scientists have found that human behaviour, especially sleep patterns and moods, are affected by the full moon, though the mechanism remains mysterious. Perhaps it is not meant to be fully explained. Perhaps it is something older than logic, deeper than data, a pull felt not in muscle, but in memory. We are creatures born of rhythm, not chaos, and the moon has given us that rhythm. Long before clocks ticked, long before calendars turned, the moon marked time. It offered predictability in a wild world. It told us when to sow, when to reap, when to rest. It guided animals across vast oceans and humans across history. The moon has never changed its method. It moves us with silence, with patience, with repetition. There is a comfort in knowing that something as massive and mysterious as the ocean can be moved by something so distant and silent. It reminds us that distance does not erase connection, and that influence does not require noise. The moon is not close, yet it holds the sea. The moon has no voice, yet it shapes the earth. And in a world where so much is loud and fast, the moon teaches us a different kind of power, a soft one, the power of steadiness, the power of presence, the power of never leaving. Even as it drifts, it remains. Even as it moves away, it continues to give. We often think of influence as something immediate, something seen, but the moon shows us another truth. Influence can be quiet. It can take years, centuries to unfold, and yet it is no less real. Some scientists believe that without the moon, complex life might never have evolved. That without its stabilizing hand, Earth would have tilted and tumbled too wildly for ecosystems to settle and thrive. That the delicate balance required for forests to rise and birds to sing would have fractured in a chaotic spin. The moon gave Earth time. It slowed the planet's spin, stretched the day from 5 hours to 24, and gave life the space to unfold slowly, to experiment, to bloom, to make mistakes and try again. In that longer day, photosynthesis could stretch into efficiency. Eyes could evolve to follow the light. Brains could grow under stable skies. The moon gave us time, and time gave us life. Not all gifts come with ceremony. Some just arrive quietly with gravity and glow, and so the tides remain, rising and falling twice each day, and in doing so they carry nutrients, shape climates, nurture wetlands, sculpt estuaries. They bring fish to the shore, birds to the reef, salt to the wind, and they remind us that the world moves not in straight lines but in cycles. The tide does not progress forward, it returns, and in returning it renews. This rhythm is not just physical, it is emotional, spiritual, ancestral. Every tradition, every culture has its moon stories. The moon is a grandmother in some, a lover in others, a god, a mirror, a mystery. But always it is a symbol of return, of light in darkness, of consistency in change. We look up and we see the same moon that moved the oceans of ancient Earth, the same moon that shone on the first fish that crept ashore, the same moon that lit the path of early humans as they crossed continents following stars and tides and instinct. And perhaps even now we are still following it, not with boats or feet, but with breath. With the quiet longing we feel when we look at the sea and do not know why we are drawn to it. With the stillness we seek when we stare at the sky and feel a silence that makes sense. That longing is ancient. It is tidal. It is lunar. The moon pulls not only water, but wonder. Not only salt, but story. It has always done this, not because it means to, but because it is there. And in being there, it gives. The moon doesn't create the ocean, but it reveals it. It shapes it. It gives it voice, and in many ways it does the same for us. We are mostly water, and that water, like the ocean, follows the moon. So perhaps we are not just people watching the tide. Perhaps we are the tide itself, lifted, drawn, held and released. Our emotions swell and settle, our lives crest and fall, our days rise and retreat. We are full of rhythms we did not choose but cannot escape. The heartbeat, the breath, the sleep, the seasons of growth and rest. all of them shaped by light, shadow, gravity, time, all of them touched by the moon. And now, as the moon slowly backs away from Earth, retreating by inches each year, it leaves behind more than a trail of influence. It leaves us a blueprint for balance, for harmony between strength and softness, for motion without violence, for presence without noise. We chase power, but the moon reminds us that true power lies in constancy, that gravity is not loud, that change is not always fast, that sometimes what moves the most is what moves the least. The moon doesn't rush, it pulls, and in that pull worlds are made. So if ever you doubt your place in the universe, look at the sea and know this: it follows the moon and you follow it. You are part of a lineage shaped not by force but by rhythm. You are the story of tides. You are the continuation of a conversation that began with light and silence. You are not alone. You never were. Every tide that ever rose, every wave that ever kissed the shore, every drop of ocean ever pulled by lunar hands. Those are your ancestors. Those are your memories. Those are the truths you carry in your blood. And the moon will continue. Long after we are gone, it will still pull. It will still rise over quiet seas. It will still lift the oceans and stir the coral and whisper to the whales. It will still shine on future eyes who will wonder, just as we do now, how something so far can touch so much. And the answer will remain the same. It pulls and the world follows. There is something ancient in your bones, something that listens to the tides even when you are far from the sea. Beneath your skin, within the marrow of your limbs, in the pulse that moves through your body without asking permission, there is rhythm, and that rhythm was not born with you. It was borrowed, passed down, carried from the first living things that rocked with the moon's pull. Before you were here, before cities and names and thoughts, the ocean moved and the moon moved it. And in that movement something was set in place, something that stayed. It travelled through time, riding the bodies of fish, of amphibians, of beasts that climbed from the surf and grew lungs in place of gills, carrying that same rhythm forward. That rhythm is in you. It is the tide within your chest, the lull within your breathing, the silent clock that tells your cells when to rest and when to wake. This inner tide is not visible, but it is real. It's the echo of ocean in blood. And the moon, still distant, still watching, keeps time with you whether you know it or not. When you sleep, when your heart slows, when your eyes move beneath closed lids, the cycles of your body mirror those of the planet. Science tells us of circadian rhythms, the 24-hour cycles that govern hormones and hunger, temperature and fatigue. But nestled deeper inside you are older rhythms, lunar rhythms, tidal ones, less understood, but just as present. Some researchers call them circalunar or infradian rhythms, named for the moon and its phases. In women, the menstrual cycle often mirrors the moon, not by superstition, but by biology. Even in men, studies have found subtle shifts in mood and melatonin that trace the moon's waxing and waning light. Our sleep deepens or grows restless depending on the lunar phase. Some animals breed only during certain phases of the moon. Sea turtles wait for full moons to climb ashore. Fish rise with the tide. Coral reefs explode with life on nights when the moon is full. These cycles are not habits. They are inheritances, carved into bodies like invisible maps, echoes of an ocean long gone, still moving inside flesh. You may think yourself separate from this, living in landlocked cities, under artificial light, behind walls and glass, but your body remembers. Your blood is saltwater still, matching the salinity of the primordial seas where your oldest ancestors began. Your cells swim in that same solution, and the moon pulls on it gently, constantly, just as it does the ocean. You do not feel it as a wave, but as an urge, a weariness at the full moon, a surge of energy as it wanes, a quietness when it disappears. The moon is not a force that shouts, it whispers, and in your bones the whisper is heard. Even in animals that have never seen the ocean, lunar influence continues. Birds in the mountains time their nesting to match moonlight. Insects in the desert emerge in cycles that mirror tides they have never tasted. Even plants respond, some opening their leaves wider under the moon's glow, some adjusting the flow of sap or scent depending on lunar pull. Life does not forget its origins. Even as it grows wings, roots, or lungs, it carries the sea within it, and the moon, that silent midwife of tides, continues to guide. The moon is not a commander, but a companion. It does not force obedience, it offers rhythm. It does not shape life by pressure, but by pattern. And in doing so, it has written itself into biology so deeply that we often miss its handwriting. We call them hormones, we call them sleep cycles, we call them instincts, but many are lunar songs in disguise. The full moon lifts the tide and also lifts something in you, something that cannot be named but feels like remembering. You are not just made of stardust, as science often says. You're made of tidal memory too, and that memory lives in the way your body rises and falls without your permission. And what of the creatures who still live by the tide, who never left the shore? The crabs who scuttle with the moon's rhythm, the fish who rise and feed as the tides flow in, the birds who migrate along coastlines lit by moonlight. They do not question the cycle, they follow it, they trust it. And perhaps that is why they do not grow sick from forgetting. Perhaps we fall ill not just from toxins or stress, but from a misalignment with our rhythm, a forgetting of our moon-tuned bones. When we ignore the night, drown it in light, break the cycle with noise and speed, perhaps the body grieves. Not loudly, but slowly. It loses its timing. The tides within fall out of step. And though we may not notice it in a day or a week, over time, we feel it in our fatigue, in our restlessness, in the ache that cannot be named. But the moon remains patient. It continues to rise, it continues to pull, it continues to send its rhythm down into the roots of trees and the marrow of bones, waiting for us to remember, to sleep when it's dark, to wake when it's time to follow the breath of the world again. In some places, people still live by the moon. They plant with it, fish with it, pray with it. They speak of good moons and bad moons, of blood moons and hunters' moons. They name them and honour them, and in doing so they align themselves again with the great rhythm that birthed them. Science may explain the gravity, but the meaning, soft, felt, lived, is beyond numbers. It is in the way a mother senses the moon rising in her child's sleeplessness, in the way a farmer feels the sap rise in trees, in the way lovers feel closer beneath a full moon without knowing why. And in you, that tide continues, not loud, not visible, but sure, in the tilt of your head, in the stillness you crave, in the heaviness of your limbs when the night is long. You do not have to live by the ocean to be shaped by it. You are the ocean wrapped in skin. You are the tide slowed into a body. And the moon, distant and glowing, is still your companion, still your clock, still your ancient guide. Let us wander now into the deeper corridors of life's quiet rhythms, where the moon's pull is not just felt in the sea, but in the unfolding of every living thing. The whisper of the moon is not always about tides you can see. Sometimes it is about tides you can only feel, tides that sway beneath the skin, tides that stir the very rhythm of sleep, growth, and renewal. The creatures of Earth, from the smallest coral to the vast blue whale, to the moon without needing language to do so. In the coral reefs of the Pacific, there is a moment just once a year when the reef blooms in unison, releasing billions of eggs and sperm into the sea like an underwater snowfall. It is not chance, it is not even season alone, it is the moon. The full moon, at just the right time, tells the coral when to begin. These reefs, which do not have eyes or ears, somehow know the light and gravity of the moon, and they obey it like a secret clock. They have no calendar, but they do not need one. The moon has always been time enough. Elsewhere on distant beaches, turtles rise from the surf and crawl ashore. They dig with heavy limbs, bury their eggs, then vanish back into the water, all of it timed to the tide and the moon. Later, when the hatchlings emerge, the light of the moon is their compass. They find their way to the water not by scent or sound, but by reflection. The moon paints a shining path across the sea, and they follow it instinctively, without instruction. If the moon is hidden, if the light is drowned by the lights of cities, the hatchlings become lost. Their rhythm is broken, their path disappears, and in that small example we see something much larger. How fragile the relationship is between life and the moon. How precise and ancient and sacred that pull has always been. It is not just beauty, it is survival. Insects too obey the moon. Moths flutter not toward light in general, but toward a celestial guide they've always known. Fireflies flash in patterns synced with lunar timing. Even the spawning of certain worms and fish aligns with phases of the moon. Some deep-sea creatures, who will never see sunlight, respond only to the lunar cues filtered through miles of water. These patterns are not superstition. They are evolutionary. They are the shapes of success written into DNA. And though we are often taught that humans have risen above instinct, we have not risen above the moon. We sleep differently depending on its phase. Our dreams grow more vivid near the full moon. Some studies have shown changes in birth rates, in psychiatric admissions, in appetite and sleep efficiency, all connected subtly to lunar timing. And perhaps the truth is not that the moon changes us, but that it reminds us of something we've forgotten, something our bodies still remember even if our minds have learned to ignore. And inside our very biology, we carry the fingerprints of this moonlit past. Every cell has a clock, and these clocks keep time not just with the day and night, but with cycles longer and quieter. Women's menstrual cycles often match the lunar cycle so closely that ancient cultures believed the moon controlled fertility. In truth, the match may not be perfect for every woman or every moment, but the correlation runs deep. The word menstruation itself comes from mensis, the Latin word for month, rooted in the same place as moon. This is not coincidence. This is history. This is rhythm written into language, just as it is written into the body. Even in animals, reproductive cycles often follow lunar patterns. Rabbits, deer, even monkeys. It is not magic. It is biology listening to gravity. Gravity that does not yank or twist but suggests. gravity that speaks in pulses. And there is something gentle in that idea, that life itself in its most intimate cycles is shaped not just by heat or food or light, but by a quiet pull from far away. Something that does not scream but hums, and that hum reaches the seed, the egg, the heart, the bone. It reaches you when you are still. It brushes past your thoughts when you lie awake at night. You may think your restlessness has no source, but the moon has risen, and your body knows it even if you do not. You may not see the tide come in, but something in you rises anyway. Something in you shifts, not wildly, not dangerously, but gently. Like the water in a glass that tips just slightly with the tremor of a distant footstep. That is how the moon moves you, not with force but with presence. And there is a comfort in this, that you are not alone in your rhythms, that the rest of life breathes alongside you, follows the same slow clock, answers the same ancient cues. The trees adjust their growth with the moon. Some studies show increases in sap flow during full moons, even in still forests. The fungi in the soil, the moss on the stone, the sleeping bird in its nest, all move with the moon. And not just animals and plants, but water itself, held within rock, within glaciers, within the invisible aquifers beneath the ground. Even those deep hidden waters rise and fall with the lunar rhythm. The moon touches water wherever it hides, and since we are mostly water, it touches us too. In the quiet of hospitals, nurses have long whispered of full moon nights, of more births, more awakenings, more unrest. Science may argue the statistics, but the stories remain, and stories like tides return again and again. Whether or not we measure the changes exactly, we feel them. Not always with instruments, but with the subtle compass inside us. The same compass that once told the fish when to leap, the bird when to nest, the leaf when to fall. That compass has not broken, it has only been drowned out by other noise, and yet in moments of stillness, in sleep, in sadness, in love, it speaks again. It reminds you that you are not built in straight lines or digital grids. You are built in cycles. You are a breathing tide. You are a wave waiting to return. And so the moon continues. Each night it changes, but never loses its pattern. It grows and shrinks, waxes and wanes, appearing and disappearing with soft certainty. And in that dance life follows. Life builds its nests, its seasons, its bones around the moon's slow turning. You may live by the clock, but you are born of the tide. Your cells keep time in silence, and when you feel adrift, when the world feels sharp and fast and broken, it helps to remember this. The moon is still rising. The tides are still moving. Your body still listens. And somewhere deep inside, the ocean in your blood still sways in answer. Let us settle now into the final unfolding, where the moon's pull is not just a tale of tides and biology, but a quiet map of belonging, a reminder that all living things are held by something greater than themselves. When we speak of rhythm, we are really speaking of home, the feeling of returning to something that holds you without condition. The moon is that for Earth, and through Earth, for us. It does not ask to be seen, and yet it glows. It does not command, and yet it changes oceans. It does not move, and yet everything follows. And as the tide moves through sea and soil and spine, something in us remembers the shape of being carried. The moon has cradled this planet through every era of life, through the rise and fall of empires, the drift of continents, the glaciation of valleys, and the quiet birth of lungs and feathers and eyes. And through it all, the moon remained. Every ancestor you have ever had looked at the same moon. Every creature that ever breathed on Earth moved to the rhythm it helped shape. The moon is not just in the sky, it is in the archive of our becoming, and perhaps this is why we keep returning to it, not just with science and spacecraft, but with poetry, with longing, with awe. It represents something ancient and unchanged, something that listens without reply, but always with present. In a world that rushes and burns and forgets, the moon does none of those things. It does not age as we do, nor does it speak our language, but it knows how to stay. It knows how to shine without heat, how to guide without touching, and in that gentleness we find a truth often lost. Power is not always loud. Influence is not always immediate. The moon teaches that quiet repetition is enough to move a planet. If it can do that to the sea, imagine what it does to a life. Imagine what it still does to yours. There are people who rise early to sit beneath the moon, who mark its phases on their walls, who believe their dreams are shaped by its fullness. There are farmers who still plant by the lunar calendar, monks who chant according to its cycles, lovers who meet under its glow, not because they must, but because it feels like returning. There is no rule that says you must look up, but when you do, something inside you softens, something slows down, something that has been stretched too thin by deadlines and doubts suddenly exhales. That is not magic, that is memory. Deep, biological, unspoken memory. A reminder that before you were busy, you were part of something slower, something older, something beautiful. And even in science, the moon story continues. In the study of chronobiology, the science of time in biology, new discoveries continue to reveal how deeply lunar cycles influence even modern humans. Some cells in the liver fluctuate with the moon. Some immune functions appear to rise and fall with lunar light. Sleep patterns, heart rate variability, even the electrical activity in the brain, all show subtle hints of this ancient clock. These are not superstitions, they are mysteries still being unfolded. Mysteries that suggest that even in the era of electricity and satellites and schedules, the body has not forgotten the moon. It never could. It is too deeply written into the code. And this is why, even in the most artificial corners of modern life, the moon breaks through. It reflects off skyscraper glass. It glows above highways. It slips through curtains and finds you in your sleep. It reminds you without words that nature is not something you visit. It is something you are. That the water in your eyes and the waves in the sea are not cousins, but kin. That the breath you take is shaped by rhythms that are not your own, but belong to you anyway. That even when you feel alone, you're not disconnected. You're part of the pattern. You're part of the pull, and the moon will always be there to remind you. Imagine now that you are standing by the sea. The tide is rolling in, not quickly, not with sound, but with purpose. You feel it at your feet, cold and gentle. Above you, the moon glows. Not full, not new, but somewhere in between. As if even it is in the middle of becoming. You feel something stir in your chest, not a thought, not a memory, but a recognition. You do not need to name it. You only need to feel it. That's what the moon does. It doesn't explain, it evokes. And as the water reaches you again and again, you realize this is not repetition. It is devotion. It is the world remembering itself, and you are part of it. Let your breath move like the tide. Let your thoughts rise and fall like the moon's light. Let your body, made of ancient ocean, feel its rhythm once more. You do not have to live by the sea to live by the tide. You only have to listen, in the still moments, in the soft ones, in the spaces between noise. That is where the moon speaks. That is where your rhythm lives. That is where life becomes not something you chase, but something you join. And so, as the moon rises again tonight, it will do what it always has. It will pull the ocean, and the ocean will come. It will pull your heart, and your heart will feel. It will shine not because we ask it to, but because that is what it does. Quietly, faithfully, eternally. It will remind the coral when to bloom, the fish when to rise, the child when to dream. It will remind you who you are, not in words but in rhythm, not in facts but in flow. You are not separate from the moon's tide, you are its living echo. The moon moves the sea moves the life becomes memory, and memory becomes you. This is not metaphor, this is the softest science. This is the truth carried not in equations, but in the salt of your tears, the curve of your sleep, the pull you feel when you look up and cannot look away. This is the moon inside you. This is the tide that breathes your bones. In the beginning there was no moon, and the sky looked very different. The earth spun faster, wild and unbalanced, its days short and its nights chaotic, with stars swirling across the heavens in dizzying patterns. The oceans, though already vast and deep, had no rhythm yet, no breath to guide them, no pulse to follow. They surged and collapsed with the winds, moved only by storms or the sun's distant tug. But then something changed. Something violent and magnificent. A collision deep in time when the earth was still young and molten. A planetary body, perhaps the size of Mars, struck the earth with such force that rock and fire leapt into the sky. A great wound opened in the side of the world, and from that wound a ring of glowing debris circled the earth, hot and bright and broken. From that brokenness the moon was born, not a foreign object, but a child of the earth's own body. And as it formed, cooling and coalescing, it began its long journey into orbit, closer than it is now, far more massive in the sky. And from the moment it began to circle, the earth began to change, because the moon did not just appear, it touched everything. It began with the oceans. The moon's gravity reached down and pulled at the water, raising it toward the sky, not with hands, not with heat, but with an invisible thread of force. The oceans, stirred by this new presence, began to move with intention. They rose and fell, leaned toward the moon and slipped away again. This was the first tide, and though it was rough and raw in those early days, it was the beginning of rhythm. For the first time the earth breathed in waves, and the sea, which had known only chaos, began to find its shape. The tide sculpted the shorelines, carved inlets and bays, gave the land its first edges and the ocean its first rhythm. But more than that, they gave movement to the ingredients of life. In the shallow places where land and water met, pools formed that filled and emptied with the tides. These tidal zones, warmed by sun and stirred by salt, became the cradle of possibility. Molecules that had drifted aimlessly now found each other more easily. They were shaken and swirled and pressed together again and again. Energy from the sun, water from the sea, minerals from the rocks, all danced in these tiny theatres of becoming, lit by the moon and warmed by the planet's core. It was here, in these in-between places, that chemistry began to shift toward biology. Life did not erupt. It whispered, it unfolded, and it followed the rhythm set by the moon. The first cells, simple and silent, lived and die in these pools, their brief existences marked by the tide's return. And with each return, new combinations formed. Some grew stronger, some learned to divide, and so life began its slow bloom, not in the deep ocean, but in the shallow places where the moon touched the sea. And as the moon continued to pull, the days on Earth began to lengthen. The spinning of the planet slowed slightly with each tidal movement, as the energy of the Earth was transferred into the orbit of the moon. This process, so slow it cannot be felt in a single lifetime, had profound consequences over billions of years. The days stretched from 5 hours to 6, then 10, then 24, and this extra time, these longer days, gave life more room to grow. Processes that required light could last longer. Organisms could expand their complexity, and night too grew into something new. Under the moon's growing glow, darkness became not emptiness, but atmosphere. The world began to soften its edges. The Earth was no longer spinning so fast, it was dizzy. It was slowing into grace, and in that grace, evolution found footing. Over millions of years, the moon's tides helped shape migration. The creatures that began in tide pools ventured farther. Some were washed inland, learning to survive in fresh water. Others followed the receding tide, adapting to land. Fins became limbs, gills became lungs. Each shift small, but guided by the moon's pull. The ocean was no longer a place of chaos, it was a path, and the moon was the guide. Even after life left the sea, it carried the tide inside, the salt in blood, the cycles of raise and wake, the instincts that whisper when the moon is full, all of it remains. The moon, though distant, became part of the body, not by choice but by inheritance. In those early days, the moon filled a larger portion of the sky. It was 10 times closer than it is now, and its presence was overwhelming, brighter, more powerful, more commanding. Its pull on the Earth was stronger, and so the tides were higher, more dramatic. The seas would surge inland for miles, then retreat. The land was shaped by this breath, and life, small and soft and new, adapted to the extremes. It grew clever. It learned to wait for the tide, learned to hide when the waters came and emerge when they left. This rhythm became survival, and from survival came intelligence. To live by the moon was to live with patience, with awareness, with the trust in the return. And so the moon didn't just create motion, it created learning. Imagine those first nights when the moon rose over a quiet, lifeless world. There were no eyes to see it, no minds to name it. And yet it pulled the oceans, carved the land, shaped the days. It set the foundation for everything that would come, and perhaps it still remembers. Perhaps, if you listen closely, the sea still tells that story, the one of how the moon first touched the earth, not with fire, but with rhythm. And that rhythm is the reason you are here, because without it, there would have been no tide. Without the tide, no mixing of molecules. Without that mixing, no life. The moon did not bring life to Earth, but it gave life a place to begin, a rhythm to follow, a path to climb. It did not need to speak, it only needed to pull, and the ocean and everything after followed. Let us move further now, not forward but deeper, into the unfolding of a world shaped gently by the moon's invisible hands. After the first tides began to breathe across the surface of the newborn earth, something quiet but unstoppable followed. Change, not in bursts or chaos, but in a rhythm so soft and patient that even mountains bowed to it over time. The moon's pull created the dance between land and sea, and in that movement, Earth began to know balance. Where there had once been only vast, crashing water, now there were shorelines that curved and bent, edges that welcomed both ocean and earth. In these places, rich in minerals and sunlight, stirred by tides and warmed by day, life began to branch out. The moon was never just a distant body in the sky. It became the keeper of the world's timing, and in doing so the mother of ecosystems. It decided when the tide would return, when the rocks would be bare, when the shallow pools would dry and refill. And so life, as it grew by the moon, it adjusted its breath, its hunger, its rest, to match the pull of something it would never touch. The earliest life was soft and simple, single-celled and small, but in the tidal rhythms, it found the conditions it needed to grow more complex. With each new cycle, different conditions emerged. Sometimes dry, sometimes wet, sometimes dark, sometimes bathed in sunlight reflected from the moon's surface. These changes were not interruptions, they were opportunities. The moon created not just motion but variation, and variation is the cradle of evolution. Some cells thrive during the high tide, others in the stillness of retreat. As the cycles repeated, life began to specialize. Some grew stronger walls, some learned to move, some learned to wait. And through these changes, the tree of life took root. What began in a whisper of molecules became a chorus of forms, all of them marked inside and out by the rhythm of the moon. The moon also gave life something else: protection. Without the moon, Earth's axis might have drifted wildly over time, tilting and wobbling in ways that could have brought destruction to any delicate ecosystem that tried to take hold. But the moon's gravitational pull stabilized Earth's spin, keeping its tilt within a narrow range. Because of this, the seasons became predictable. The climate held steady enough for forests to rise, for polar ice to form, for migration to make sense. The moon became the anchor that kept Earth from spinning into chaos, and life, trusting that anchor, grew in confidence. Trees stretched taller, insects learned flight, fish became birds, and water breath became air breath. Each step was a risk, but the moon was always there, pulling gently, offering rhythm, offering balance. Even today, the moon's influence reaches far beyond the tides we see. Deep under the ground, groundwater levels rise and fall with lunar cycles. The movement of tectonic plates, some studies suggest, may be slightly affected by the moon's gravitational pull, and in the atmosphere too, the moon leaves its fingerprints. The light it reflects cools the night gently. The gravity it exerts subtly tugs on the very air we breathe. And though we rarely feel these things directly, they shape the world around us every moment. The moon's gift is not in spectacle but in consistency. It does not bring the thunder, but it brings the rhythm that lets thunder matter. It does not shine like the sun, but it teaches life how to follow light in darkness. In ancient oceans, the moon created not just waves, but waiting. Life learned to pause and endure, to know that the sea would return and with it nourishment. It learned to time its reproduction, its movement, its growth to the gentle inhale and exhale of the tides. Coral learned to bloom together. Fish learned to follow the moon's path. Even after evolution pushed creatures onto land, they still carried those cycles: human sleep patterns, animal migrations, plant blooming. All of it echoes the first conversations between moon and sea. And perhaps this is why the moon continues to feel like more than rock and gravity. It feels like origin. It feels like there is a softness to this truth, a gentleness that science sometimes forgets to name, but you can feel it. You can feel it when you sit by the sea and the tide reaches your toes with perfect timing. You can feel it when you watch the moon rise and your breathing slows without you asking it to. You can feel it when a baby sleeps more deeply under a full moon, or when your thoughts drift like waves without direction but with rhythm. The moon is not a god or a machine, it is a memory kept in motion, a rhythm that never stopped, a gift given without demand. Did not ask to be thanked, it simply pulled, and by pulling it shaped everything that ever was. Imagine now the earth, still young, the moon closer than today, its presence massive in the sky, bathing the world in silver. The ocean glows with it, the land listens, and somewhere in a tide pool a new cell divides, carrying with it the rhythm of the tide, the hope of survival, the memory of the moon. That cell will lead to others, to creatures, to limbs and lungs, to thoughts and hands, to words and stories. And even after all those millions of years, even now, that cell's descendant sits under the same moon and wonders where it all began. The answer, in part, is here, in the moment when the moon first touched the sea and taught it to move, not with force, but with grace. And still it continues. The moon still rises, the sea still answers, the world still breathes in rhythm. Your body, whether you know it or not, still keeps time with a rock in the sky. And that, perhaps, is the most beautiful truth of all, that the moon, though silent, has always spoken, and you, though busy and modern and full of thoughts, have always listened. Not with ears, but with blood, with mind, but with breath. That listening is your inheritance, that rhythm is your beginning. And so we arrive at the edge of time's great tide, where the moon, having long since taken its place in the sky, still watches over a world it helped shape with quiet persistence. The story of how the moon first touched the sea is not finished, because the touching never stopped. It continues, with every rise and fall of the tide, with every heartbeat that mimics the swell of the ocean, with every sleep cycle shaped by moonlight. The moon's pull is not a moment in history, but a thread that runs through the entire fabric of life. It connects the first bubbling tide pools to the intricate rhythms of modern cities, the ancient coral blooms to the hidden pulses within your blood. Though we often speak of progress as a departure from the past, the moon reminds us that evolution is not escape. It is elaboration. We are not apart from the sea, we are the sea refined into thought. We are not separate from the tide, we are its walking echo. And even now, in the age of machines and numbers, the moon continues its work, unseen but never unfelt. The moon is no longer as close as it was when it first formed. With every year it drifts a few centimeters farther from the Earth. It is a slow, unnoticeable parting, like the long exhale of a breath that takes millennia. But distance does not undo influence. The tides still come, the rhythms still hold, the sea still leans toward the moon with unwavering trust. And in that trust there is a lesson. that connection does not require closeness, that what once shaped you can continue to shape you even from afar. In the same way, the memories carried by your body, of oceans, of rhythms, of breath and blood and salt, continue to guide you even if you cannot name them. You're made not just of atoms and air, but of time. You're built of cycles that began before language. You're a continuation of that first tide, that first pull. And if you look closely, you will see the moon's reflection in the smallest things, in the migration of birds who fly by lunar compass, in the spawning of sea creatures who wait for the perfect phase, in the sleep that feels heavier during the full moon, in the way your thoughts soften under moonlight, in the way shadow lengthen differently when the moon is high. You will see it in the way children look up and whisper questions, and in the way the elderly sit by windows during full moons, as if waiting for something familiar to appear. The moon is woven into behaviour, into mood, into instinct, and it does not ask to be worshipped, it asks only to be noticed. Not as a symbol, but as a partner. Long before humans understood gravity, they understood the moon. They built calendars around its phases, temples aligned with its light. They told stories of wolves howling, of lovers yearning, of gods rising and falling with the moon's changing face. These were not primitive myths. They were attempts to speak the truth that could be felt but not explained, that something up there was guiding what was down here, that the ocean was not alone in its motion, that Earth itself had a silent twin, a companion that did not shine with its own light, but reflected something greater, and that reflection became a mirror, not just for the world, but for the soul. Because the moon has always been more than just a satellite. It is a presence, a reminder, a rhythm made visible. Now think of the Earth as it is today, full of life, full of sound, full of movement. The moon still hangs above it, distant and quiet, still pulling at the seas, still slowing the Earth's spin, still keeping the planet's axis steady. Without the moon, the Earth would wobble wildly. Seasons would swing between extremes. The oceans would fall into unpredictable rhythms. Some scientists believe that without the moon, life might never have made it to land, or might not have survived at all. The moon did not just help life begin, it helped life endure. And that, perhaps, is its greatest gift. Not the spark of creation, but the steadiness that allowed creation to continue. It offered not chaos, but cadence, not direction, but repetition. And in that repetition, life found stability. And life in turn honoured the rhythm. Creatures evolved with internal clocks, circadian rhythms, lunar rhythms, tidal cycles. Trees dropped their leaves in time. Insects emerged when the moon was right, and we too followed. We slept and woke with the turning of the moon. We marked time by its face. We told our stories by its light. And even as technology dimmed the stars, the moon continued to rise. Even when we stopped looking up, it did not stop watching. Even as our nights filled with neon and noise, the moon remained unchanged. Not because it is indifferent, but because it is eternal. It is strange then how something so constant can still feel so mysterious, how something that has always been there can still surprise us. But perhaps that is the nature of rhythm. It becomes invisible until we stop and listen. The heartbeat, the breath, the tide, they are background music until we are quiet enough to hear. And in that quiet we find the moon again. Not as a mystery to solve, but as a presence to feel. Not as an object, but as a companion. It touches the ocean still, it moves them without pride, it holds the world without demand. and in return, the world moves with it. Tonight, as the moon rises once more, the sea will respond. Somewhere a crab will climb the sand. Somewhere else, coral will prepare to bloom. A bird will wait to take flight. A plant will open just slightly wider. And you, perhaps, will pause, will notice, will remember that before clocks and calendars, before names and nations, there was this: the moon, the sea, and the quiet space between them where life began to breathe. That breath is still inside you. That rhythm is still yours. You do not need to go to the ocean to find it. You only need to feel the tide in your chest, the pull of memory in your marrow, the echo of water in your bones. Because the moon did not just touch the sea, it touched everything that came after. It touched time, it touched growth, it touched you. And the story continues, not just in history, but in this very moment, in this breath, in this tide, in this moon. There is a kind of light that does not blind or burn, a light that asks nothing yet offers everything. It is the light of the moon, soft and borrowed, a mirror of the sun's fire reflected into gentle glow. While sunlight demands attention, moonlight invites surrender. It lays across fields and oceans like a breath, illuminating without heat, shaping shadows without fear. This quiet pull of lunar light has followed life across every era, not with noise, but with presence. When the moon rises, it brings more than glow. It brings rhythm, memory, and direction. For countless generations, life has turned its face, not just toward the sun, but toward the moon, not to grow, but to know. To know when to rest, when to move, when to bloom, when to return. Lunar light is not bright enough to feed plants or warm the soil, but it is bright enough to guide migration, enough to trigger birth, enough to stir the sea. And in this subtle light, we find something ancient, a way of listening that is not about hearing but about feeling. In the deep forests where canopies hide the stars, moonlight filters through in shafts so delicate they barely touch the moss below. Yet animals watch for this light. They know its phases. Deer lift their heads at its return, owls fly differently beneath it. Even flowers, certain night-blooming ones, wait for the right phase of the moon to open. This is not myth. It is sensitivity woven into instinct. The moon, with all its quietness, has always been a signal. Not loud, not clear, but constant. And in nature, constancy matters more than volume. The moon's light comes and goes in cycles so dependable that entire ecosystems are built around them. In the ocean, bioluminescent plankton shimmer in reply. In the sky, migrating birds adjust their course. In the desert, insects emerge not at random, but when the moon reaches a certain brightness. They are not counting days, they are reading light. And that light, though it does not penetrate deeply like the sun's, has its own magic. It can travel through clouds more gracefully. It can fall across snow and make it glow like silver. It can rest on a sleeping child's face without waking them. It is light meant not to command, but to comfort. Lunar light has no urgency. It moves slowly. It waxes and wanes with humility. It teaches a kind of patience that sunlight cannot. And perhaps that is why it feels so different. The moon changes, and in doing so reminds us that we can too. No phase lasts forever. Not even the full moon. Not even the darkness. In this cycle there is wisdom, that stillness is not stagnation, and that growth sometimes looks like quiet retreat. And deep within this rhythm animals have made their home. Certain fish in coral reefs, like the Pololo worm, synchronize their reproduction with the lunar calendar. At a specific phase under specific light, they release their eggs and sperm into the water, trusting that others of their kind will do the same. There is no rehearsal, only rhythm, and it works, year after year, light after light. Some birds too nest with the moon, others migrate by it. Loggerhead turtles lay their eggs in tune with lunar brightness, and when the hatchlings emerge weeks later, they find their way to by following the shimmering path the moon paints across the water. If that light is stolen, if city lights drown it, many hatchlings become lost, moving inland instead of out to sea. Lunar light is not just soft, it is necessary. Even trees, long thought indifferent to the moon, have begun to reveal subtle signs of attention. In recent studies, slight movements of leaves, upward tilts, nocturnal droops, have been observed to align with the moon's path. While plants may not see, they certainly feel, and that feeling reaches into us as well. Human sleep, long studied and still mysterious, changes subtly with the phases of the moon. On nights near the full moon, people fall asleep later, sleep less deeply, and dream more vividly. This is not because the moon intrudes, but because it invites. Its light stirs something within the body, a whisper, not a call, and some respond without knowing why. Lunar light also shaped the way we understood time. Long before we measured hours and minutes, we measured moons. The word month itself is born from the moon's cycle. Ancient peoples looked up and saw not just light, but pattern. The waxing crescent, the full orb, the fading shadow. It was a calendar etched into the sky. And with it they marked celebrations, planting, birth, mourning. Civilizations aligned rituals to the moon's dance. Even now, many cultural holidays and religious events follow lunar calendars. Eid, Passover, Diwali, the Chinese New Year. The moon in this way did not just illuminate the night, it shaped belief, ritual, memory. But perhaps the most profound thing about lunar light is how it makes you feel. Not think. Feel. It quiets the world. Your breath fights you to walk without purpose, to gaze without needing answers. It brings a kind of solitude that is not lonely but full of space, full of the soft knowing that something ancient and beautiful is overhead, watching but not judging, shining but not shouting. When you stand beneath a full moon in a quiet place, something shifts in your body, not because anything changes outside you, but because something awakens inside. It's as though the moon pulls not just water, but thought, not just tide, but tenderness. You begin to feel small in the best way. You begin to remember that you are part of something slower, older, gentler. And this perhaps is the moon's greatest gift. In a world so filled with speed, with harsh lights and sharp sounds, the moon offers softness. It gives you permission to slow down, to reflect, to breathe like the tides. Steady, in and out. The moon does not change your life in an instant. It changes the way you notice it, bit by bit, night by night. It teaches that presence matters more than brilliance, that showing up again and again, even in partial light, even in silence, is its own kind of strength. And if the moon can be powerful by simply reflecting, then maybe you can be too. So tonight, when the moon rises, let it rise not just in the sky, but in you. Let its light fall across your thoughts like silver dust. Let it pull you inward, toward rest, toward softness, toward the rhythm you've always known but maybe forgot to follow. You're not meant to burn brightly every day. You're meant to wax and wane. You're meant to glow, then dim, then glow again. You're not broken in your quiet phases. You're following the moon. There is something deeply sacred about the way light moves when it comes from the moon. It is not direct, but softened, not blinding, but tender, as if every ray had passed through time itself before touching the earth. And in that softness, life has found sanctuary. In the animal kingdom, where survival often relies on precision, the phases of the moon are not random or decorative, they are essential. Beneath the surface of the ocean, entire ecosystems rise and fall in quiet agreement with lunar light. Spawning events happen not in reaction to temperature or food alone, but in response to the rhythm of moonbeams stretched across the sea. These cues are invisible to us, but not to the plankton, the fish, the corals, or the great whales. A full moon can trigger the beginning of a journey that spans thousands of miles, simply because its light touches the surface in just the right way. And in the forests and fields of land-bound life, this light is no less influential. Predators hunt differently under its brightness, prey hide with more care. The moon does not speak, yet every creature listens. Their instincts shaped by generations of quiet observation. Lunar light's pull is especially powerful in places where darkness defines the natural order. Deep caves, dense jungles, polar winters. In these spaces, the sudden appearance of moonlight becomes an event, a signal that movement is safe or possible or necessary. For nocturnal creatures, the difference between a new moon and a full one is as dramatic as the shift from silence to song. And for some species, their very biology has evolved to align with that difference. Reproduction, feeding, migration, all have been shaped by the moon's rhythm. Even human biology, often believed to be above or beyond such ancient clocks, still carries the imprint of lunar cycles. Some researchers suggest that melatonin levels, mood fluctuations, and even healing processes are subtly modulated by the moon's phases. And whether or not every claim is proven, the patterns are hard to ignore. Sleep tends to be lighter during full moons, emotions deeper, dreams more vivid. Something inside us still turns when the moon turns, still remembers the shape of that light across the skin. In the quiet corners of ancient life, long before cities and clocks and calendars, humans lived with this rhythm intimately. They did not wonder if the moon affected them, they knew it did. They planted by it, danced by it, rested in its cycles. They believed that the full moon could bring clarity and the new moon reflection. Their stories were written in phases, their rituals woven around waxing and waning. The moon was not a distant object in the sky, it was a companion. It changed, and they changed with it. It disappeared, and they waited. It returned, and they rejoiced. This relationship was not based on fear or worship, but on deep familiarity. The moon was the most predictable thing they knew. It never failed to rise. It never failed to follow its own path. And in that consistency, they found something that felt like truth. Even now, in a world humming with artificial light, something ancient stirs when the moon is full. People step outside without knowing why. They look up, not expecting answers, but needing presence. The moon offers a kind of company that does not interrupt or distract, it simply is. And in that being, it reminds us of something we've almost forgotten, that presence is enough, that cycles are not failures but forms of progress, that darkness is not the absence of light, but its quiet part, and that even the dimmest glow can be a guide when it returns consistently. There is no rush in the moon's light, no demand, just a slow unfolding that invites us to match its pace. This quiet guidance extends into our expressions of creativity, of intuition, of rest. Writers, painters, and dreamers often find themselves pulled toward their craft by moonlight, not because it shows them what to make, but because it opens the door to the space where making becomes possible. Lunar light blurs the boundaries between thought and emotion, between memory and imagination. It softens the edge of the world just enough to let ideas in. It silences the noise just long enough for truth to echo. It is not that the moon gives us visions, it simply gives us quiet. And in that quiet, our own voice grows clearer. This is the gift of indirect light. It does not shine on you, it shines near you. And in doing so, it invites you to meet it halfway. Even the language we use has been shaped by the moon's light. We speak of being moonstruck, of lunacy, of longing under moonlight. We use the moon to speak of emotions too wide or deep to explain directly. We do not say sunbroken when we are overwhelmed, we say heartbroken beneath the moon. We do not speak of dreams born in daylight, but of those born by the light of the moon. The moon is where we place our metaphors, our mysteries, our moods, and perhaps that is because its light leaves just enough shadow to allow wonder to survive. In the spaces the moon does not reach, imagination fills in. And so we dream and we ache, we feel connected to something larger than ourselves. For all its beauty, the moon does not push its meaning on us. It does not define, it offers. It does not instruct, it reflects. And in this reflection we find ourselves. We remember the parts of us that do not require explanation, the parts that simply are, like the tides, like the trees, like the distant song of a night bird who calls not to be heard, but because the moon has risen and it is time. This is the language of lunar light. Not syllables or sentences, but presence, timing, rhythm. And it is a language we have never fully forgotten. Perhaps the greatest lesson lunar light offers is this, that you do not need to shine with your own brilliance to make a difference. You do not need to burn. You only need to reflect what is good and constant and true. The moon reflects the sun, yes, but in doing so it creates its own kind of beauty. It teaches us that gentleness is powerful, that stillness can be transformative, that timing, not intensity, creates change. And in that way, the moon continues to be a guide, not through control, but through consistency, not through force, but through rhythm, not through heat, but through light. So let it rise, let it paint your windows, your skin, your thoughts, let it slow you down. Let it remind you that not all light is meant to dazzle, some is meant to deepen, to calm, to restore. And the next time you find yourself awake while the world sleeps, and the moon is hanging above you like a quiet companion, remember this: you are not lost in the night, you are exactly where the light wants you to be. Let us now return one last time to the silver hush of the moon, not as a final chapter but as a reminder that some stories never truly end. They only echo softer, like the fading tide against a quiet shore. The moon has never stopped reflecting, and we have never stopped being drawn to it. Its light does not change the world in an instant, but it changes the feeling of the world entirely. It turns empty fields into sacred places, rooftops into observatories, the stillness of night into a realm of reflection. And this quiet pull of lunar light continues to weave itself through every life, whether we notice it or not. A night walk under its glow carries more clarity than daylight could ever offer. It is not the brightness of the moon that moves us, it is the softness, the timing, the way it arrives again and again without demand, and in doing so reminds us that constancy is its own kind of love. You do not have to chase the moon, it will come back. It always comes back. And in that return, it brings with it a calmness that even the stars seem to trust. Across time, cultures far apart and unaware of each other have looked at the same moon and seen their stories written in it. They have found ancestors, wolves, rivers, lovers, ladders, and gods. They have told tales of people who lived on the moon, cried for the moon, followed the moon into forests and deserts and oceans. They looked up and saw not just light but belonging. In Japan, the moon is said to hold a rabbit pounding rice cakes. In some African traditions, the moon is a grandmother who guides with wisdom. And in countless indigenous teachings across the world, the moon is a calendar, a mother, a timekeeper, a mirror of the soul. These stories are not accidents. They are responses to something deeply true. That the moon does not just reflect sunlight, it reflects us. Our needs for rhythm and rest, return, our longing for something both eternal and changing. Our awareness that life is not a straight line but a cycle ever turning. And so the moon watches, as it always has, rising over war and peace, over birth and death, over laughter and silence. It has no preference, it simply continues. And because it continues, we find our way back to ourselves. It is no small thing that the moon governs the tides, and the tides shape the coastlines, and the coastlines shape the ecosystems, and the ecosystems shape us. It is no small thing that sleep shifts under its light, that animals time their most precious moments by its face. Even trees adjust their rhythm to the soft push of its pull. Even your breath, in the stillness of a moonlit night, deepens in a way it does not under artificial light. The body knows, it always has. The moon was there before us. It will be there after, and still tonight, it is here. Imagine yourself standing in a clearing far from the noise of towns under a full moon. The trees are still, the air cool, the world feels paused, but not empty. The light is pale and soft, casting long shadows that stretch like whispers. There is no speech, but there is presence. And in that presence, a memory awakens, perhaps not one you can name, but one your body recognizes. A time when night was not feared, but we welcomed. A time when light did not mean activity, but awareness. You look up, and the moon is not far, is close, not in distance, but in feeling. Is not something above, is something with. You feel it in your breath, in your skin, in your slowing heartbeat. You feel it not as information, but as alignment. There is nothing to do in this moment but exist. And perhaps that is the lesson we keep forgetting. That stillness is not a failure. That being is enough. The moon does not do, it is, and yet it changes the ocean, the weather, the sleep of children, the journey of turtles, the scent of flowers. It reminds us that presence alone can be transformative, that we do not need to fix or solve every hour, that we too are allowed to wax and wane, to rest, to reflect, to wait, that some of our most important changes happen not in action but in rhythm. The moon does not hurry, it never has, and still it guides everything. Even as we grow older, even as the world grows louder, the moon stays slow, and maybe that is why it feels so gentle, because it refuses to rush us. We live in a time that celebrates urgency, speed, brightness. But the moon celebrates return. It shows up, even in shadow. It holds space for each of its phases, never rushing to full. It accepts its own darkness as part of its nature, and in doing so it offers us a permission we rarely give ourselves, to be incomplete, to be in process, to be present, even when we are not shining. You do not have to be full to be beautiful. The moon proves that every night. When a baby sleeps soundly under moonlight, when a writer finds their words beneath its glow, when someone pauses a conversation to say, "Look, the moon is so bright tonight," something ancient is being remembered. A softness, a rhythm, a truth too large for explanation but too familiar to ignore. The moon holds the part of us that still believes in gentleness. It holds the part that watches instead of reacts. It holds the part that waits. And though we build taller towers and brighter lights, we cannot erase the pull. We can only quiet ourselves enough to feel it again. So let the moon rise. Let it find you wherever you are, not to change you, but to remind you that you belong to cycles, that your darkness is part of your light, that your presence, however quiet, still matters, that like the moon, you are always in motion, even when you are still, that your glow, however small, reaches farther than you know. And if you ever forget, just step outside, look up, breathe, and remember, the moon is watching, the moon is pulling, the moon is reflecting, and you, made of tide and memory, are already aligned. Long before lungs ever drew a breath, long before a heart ever beat in rhythm with its own echo, the world was held in water. Everything that lived was submerged, surrounded, floating in a liquid memory where the sky could not yet be reached and the ground was not yet claimed. In these ancient waters, life moved slowly, pulsing and drifting, not with will, but with the currents. There was no need for air. Gills filtered oxygen through water, and the tides brought nourishment to the edge of every creature's world. The earth was a blue silence, a dreaming ocean wrapped in starlight, and yet above that ocean, something watched. The moon, still young in the sky, hung low and bright, closer to Earth than it is today. Its gravitational pull rocked the seas, lifting and lowering them twice a day, whispering to the tides like a lullaby. It stretched across eons. It was this motion, this constant breathing of the ocean, that began to stir something deeper. The moon, without touching the sea, taught it to move, and that movement, subtle and rhythmic, began to shape the world in ways far beyond waves and shores. It began to shape the very blueprint of life. Where the tide met the land, pools formed, temporary shallow, changing. Here water would gather, warm in the sunlight, then recede. These tidal flats became a classroom where nature experimented. Organisms that lived in these pools had to survive periods of both submersion and exposure. They needed to learn resilience. Some evolved thicker membranes, others burrowed into the mud, and some began to adapt to the impossible, life between water and air. Slowly, over countless generations, the need to survive out of water gave rise to new ways of exchanging oxygen. At first, it was crude and accidental. Some fish developed primitive air-breathing abilities, allowing them to gulp air from the surface when water was scarce. These early attempts were not elegant, but they were enough. Enough to keep life alive in the in-between, enough to begin the slow, miraculous invention of lungs. It was the moon, in its tireless pulling, that created the environment where this could happen. Without the tides, these shallow, shifting places would not exist. Without their predictable rhythm, life would not have faced the challenge of adaptation so precisely, so repeatedly. The moon created the opportunity, and life answered. And in doing so, life began to reach beyond the water. Amphibians emerged, creatures that lived in both realms, wet and dry, pulled by instinct and necessity. They laid their eggs in water but hunted on land. Their lungs were soft and weak at first, but the air was waiting, and in the air a new kind of freedom unfolded. Gravity felt heavier, yes, but there was space to move, to grow, to see farther. And with space came complexity. The lung, once a simple sac, became a tree inside the chest, branching and dividing until every breath became a forest of life, and still the moon watched. Every step forward was a memory of the sea. Even as creatures moved fully onto land, they carried the ocean inside them. Our blood still carries the salt of ancient tides. Our cells still swim in fluids modelled after seawater. Our breath, though taken from the sky, still follows a rhythm older than time, the inhale and exhale that mirrors the rising and falling tide. We breathe because we are taught to, not by words or learning, but by design. The moon pulled the water shaped the shore. The shore challenged life, and life responded by finding breath. Not suddenly, not perfectly, but patiently. This is the moon's way. It does not demand change. It creates the conditions in which change becomes possible, and that rhythm of change, of breath, of movement continued through every chapter of evolution. Reptiles grew lungs more efficient than those of amphibians. Birds developed air sacs that let them fly. Mammals learned to hold their breath for minutes, even hours, diving deep and rising again, always with the moon's tides under their skin. And humans too evolved with this same breath. Though we no longer live at the edge of the tide pool, we still live by the breath it gave us. The moon did not disappear when we built our cities. It did not stop pulling. Its influence, while invisible, remains in every heartbeat, in every rising chest. It is the breath we forget to notice but cannot live without. Even today, breath and moon remain connected. Yogic traditions speak of aligning breath with lunar phases, cooling breaths during full moons, deep exhalations during waning phases. Sleep scientists observe that the moon affects the quality and timing of rest, which in turn influences the rhythm of breath. And in the natural world, animals still rise and rest with the moon. Nocturnal creatures are quieter during new moons, more active when the full moon floods the land with light. The moon sets a pace and breath follows. Not always consciously, not always observably, but always truly. There is something extraordinary in knowing that your lungs, which open and close without thought, are the product of ancient tides. That the very air you pull in now is the continuation of a conversation between ocean and sky, guided by the moon's gentle hand. When you pause and take a deep breath, you are not just calming your body, you are honouring a rhythm older than language. You are remembering something every ancestor knew, not in mind but in bone. that life is not sustained by strength alone, but by the patience of repetition, by the tide's return, by the breath that follows the last one, by the moon that never leaves. And in this way, the moon has always been a teacher, not of facts, but of Zu. It taught life how to endure change, not by resisting, but by breathing through it. It taught organisms that survival is not about control, but adaptation. And it taught us, in time, that the most essential things are the ones we do without thinking. Beating hearts, rising tides, quiet breaths beneath quiet moons. You do not have to try to breathe. You only have to allow it. You do not have to control the tide. You only have to let it come. This is the wisdom of the moon, not command, but invitation. Tonight, if you sit still enough and listen, you may hear the rhythm of your own breath echoing the waves. You may feel the moon's soft light across your face and know without words that you are part of something vast, something slow, something gentle. You may feel your chest rise and realize that each breath you take is a gift shaped by gravity and time and patience. You are not just breathing, you're remembering. You're participating in a rhythm that made lungs possible. And somewhere, perhaps, the moon is still pulling the tide, still shaping the shore, still teaching new life how to rise from water and begin again. Let us drift further now, into the long unfolding that followed the moon's first lessons, into the hush of ages when the world was learning to breathe more deeply, more fully, one quiet inhale at a time. After life had taken its first steps from water to air, guided by the rhythm of the tides, the earth entered a season of great patience. It was not a time of sudden miracles, but of slow becoming, and through every moment of it, the moon continued to pull, not loudly, not dramatically, but faithfully. In the shallows, creatures were still experimenting with air. Some moved only briefly onto land and returned to the safety of water. Others ventured farther, feeling the moon's rhythm in the dry stillness and the warm wind. With each generation, lungs became stronger, muscles adapted, skin thickened, and breath became more than survival. It became presence. It became the sound of life alive in a new world. On land, breathing was not just necessity, it was intimacy. To breathe was to feel the heat of the sun, the chill of night, the scent of rain. It was a way of touching the world without touching it. And always, within this new language of air, the pulse of the moon echoed beneath it. The first forests rose under the moon's gaze. Plants, too, had begun to listen. While they did not breathe in the same way animals did, they exchanged gases with the sky, exhaling oxygen and inhaling carbon dioxide. Their leaves unfolded by daylight and rested under moonlight. Certain flowers bloomed only under a full moon, trusting its silver glow to attract pollinators who fluttered silently through the night. These were not accidents. These were rhythms. Even the trees, anchored in soil, followed the moon. Sap flowed differently depending on the phase. Moisture shifted, roots adjusted. The entire living earth, from soil to sky, had fallen into sync with the celestial breath that began when the moon first stirred the ocean. And life kept listening. Fish swam upstream to spawn, sensing not just the pull of gravity, but the tug of time set by lunar rhythm. Birds crossed entire continents, following stars at night and timing their flights to the phases of the moon. Whales sang songs that spanned oceans, their breath rising in great silver plumes into moonlit air. Each exhale was a hymn to the surface, a soft testimony to the lungs they had inherited from ancestors who once gasped in tidal pools. Even insects, the smallest, most fragile, measured their lives by the moon. Cicadas timed their emergence to its phases. Fireflies blinked in patterns matched to lunar light. It seemed, across all species, across all scales, the moon had not just taught life to breathe, it had taught it when. And within us too, that memory lives. Though we no longer crawl from water onto land, though our breath no longer depends on the tide, we still carry the imprint. Our lungs rise and fall without our asking. Our hearts beat in slow reply. And beneath even that, the breath moves like a tide inside the body, in and out, rise and fall, echoing not just the moon's pull, but the first lessons it offered. That breath does not just keep us alive, it connects us to everything that came before. Each inhale is shared, not just with the world around you, but with the ancestors of breath. The fish that learned to surface, the amphibians that waited for the tide, the mammals that rose into sky and story. You are the end of their sentence, you are the continuation of their rhythm. And the moon still shapes that rhythm. Studies in chronobiology reveal that human physiology does not respond only to solar cues, but to lunar ones as well. Hormonal cycles, particularly in women, often align with the moon's 29.5-day cycle. Mood shifts, sleep depth, even a heart rate can show subtle fluctuations as the moon grows full and then fades. Some researchers argue about causation, others debate the data, but the body, it seems, does not debate. It listens, it adjusts, it remembers. Somewhere deep in the nervous system, the moon is still a guide. Somewhere inside the lungs, the rhythm still follows the sea. We are not machines that run independently. We are ecosystems built on memory, shaped by silence, moved by forces we cannot see but always feel. Even our creativity seems to follow this tide. Writers, artists, musicians often speak of working best by moonlight, of feeling a surge of clarity or emotion as the full moon rises. There is no proven science for this, no measurement that captures the muse in lunar terms, and yet the pattern is old. The moon stirs not just biology, but spirit, not just the body, but the imagination. Perhaps it is the softness of its light or the quiet of the world beneath it, or perhaps something deeper, the idea that even in darkness something shines. That even when it is not full, the moon is still complete. That we too are allowed to be incomplete on the outside and whole within, and so the breath goes on. We do not teach it. We do not earn it. It arrives, and it leaves, and it returns. The same is true of tides, of moons, of seasons, and in that return there is wisdom. The wisdom that not all progress is forward. Some progress is circular, some growth is in the revisiting, the repetition, the rhythm. The moon never grows brighter, it never adds new light, it simply reflects. And in that reflection we find light enough. It reminds us that breath does not have to be perfect, it only has to be present. Close your eyes and you can feel it now. The rhythm of your breath, the quiet pulse of your body, the slow unfolding of thought. Beneath all of it, the moon is moving above you, unseen but present, pulling not just the tides but your very cells into harmony. You're not separate from the moon's influence. You're a story it began to write long before there were words. And as long as you breathe, you are still part of that story, still shaped by the patience of tides, still learning with every inhale how to live in rhythm with what moves you without touching you. The lungs you carry are not just organs, they are instruments of memory. They remember what it meant to breathe water. They remember the tides that sculpted their form. And though you may never feel the moon's gravity press against your skin, your breath does. It knows, it listens. And in listening, it continues the most ancient of songs, the song of life rising from the sea, drawn by light, pulled by rhythm, taught by the quiet hand of the moon. Now let us rest within the final breath of this journey, the quiet space where the moon's soft instruction is no longer something distant, but something alive within every inhale you take. The story of how the moon taught life to breathe is not finished, because breathing has never been about beginning or ending. It is about continuity, presence, and surrender. Each breath is a return, a repetition, a rhythm older than bone, older than thought. It began in water, under the push and pull of vivid tides, and it now rises in lungs beneath city skies and forest canopies and desert moons. And though we no longer trace the moon's phases with ritual or survival, it still shapes us, not with force, but with flow. There is a strange comfort in knowing that every breath you take today, right now, is part of a pattern started billions of years ago when the moon first stirred the sea. That the act of inhaling is not just about air, but about ancestry, about trust in the invisible, about alignment with a rhythm so vast and constant that even the stars remain quiet in its presence. We often imagine ourselves as separate from the natural world, more evolved, more complex, more deliberate. But breath reminds us otherwise. Breath is not commanded by the will. It arrives on its own, soft and steady, and leaves without fanfare. It is the most essential part of being alive, and yet it is the one thing we do without choosing. And that is perhaps the moon's most enduring lesson, that not everything must be controlled, that life does not have to be forced into being. Sometimes it only needs the right conditions, the right repetition, the right quiet invitation. When the moon pulled at the waters and created those first tidal pools, it did not know what would happen, it simply moved. And that movement gave rise to everything, to breath, to bone, to song, to cities. We are not the product of perfection. We are the children of rhythm. And still, the moon continues. Though it now drifts farther from the earth each year, its pull remains. The tides come, the waves climb the shore, pause and retreat. This inhale and exhale of the world does not end. It is not just water that rises and falls, it is everything. The breath of wind, the pulse of blood, the stretch of thought, the patterns of rest and wake, hunger and fullness, noise and silence. The moon is written into every living cycle, not with ink, but with gravity. And gravity, though unseen, never forgets what it holds. So you too are held, not by hands, but by rhythm. You are cradled by a force you cannot see, but which guides your every breath. You do not need to understand it to belong to it. You already do. When we lose our rhythm, when anxiety quickens the breath, when grief makes it shallow, when stress interrupts its flow, we are not broken. We are simply out of step with something older than worry. The way back is always the same. Stillness, slowness, remembering. Breathing is not just physical, it is sacred. It is how we realign with the world that made us, and when we return to it, we remember that we were never alone, that the same force that pulls the tides is pulling us, gently, steadily, toward presence. And presence is where healing begins. Across the world, spiritual traditions have long recognized the sacredness of breath. In Sanskrit, the word for breath, prana, means life force. In Hebrew, ruach is both breath and spirit. In Greek, pneuma carries the same dual meaning. To breathe is to be animated, to be filled with something beyond the body. And beneath all these traditions, beneath all these meanings, there is one common truth. Breath is more than survival. It is connection. It is memory. It is rhythm. And the moon, quiet and consistent, has always been its teacher. Even in sleep, we do not stop breathing. Even in sorrow, even in silence. And in those moments, the moon shines brightest. It does not interrupt our sleep, but watches over it. It does not interfere with our pain, but pulls gently, steadily, reminding us that everything moves in cycles. Darkness is not forever, neither is light. The breath you take today will be followed by another, and another, until, at last, you return to the place from which all breath began, and even then the rhythm will continue. Others will breathe, the tides will rise, the moon will pull, and the world will go on, quietly held by the same force that shaped its first inhale. It is easy to forget this, easy to believe that life is defined by goals and noise and motion. But when you step outside on a still night and look up at the moon, you feel something else entirely. You feel the quiet truth that being is enough, that breathing is enough, that your presence, even without achievement, is part of the pattern. You're not separate from the sea. You're the tide in a new form. You're not different from the wind. You are its breath-given shape. You are not apart from the moon. You are the answer it called forth when it first touched the water and asked the world to move. So when you feel overwhelmed or lost, when you're out of breath in more ways than one, return to this. The moon is still pulling. The rhythm is still beneath you. You do not have to fix everything. You only have to pause. Inhale, exhale. Let the breath come as it always has, softly, patiently, like the tide returning home. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are right on time, because time is not a line but a rhythm, and you are still within it, still breathing, still becoming, still part of the soft story written by the moon across the sea of time. The next time you sit in quiet and feel your chest rise and fall, remember that this is not just your breath. It is the earth's breath through you. It is the moon's gift, shaped by water and longing, and the slow miracle of time. Every inhale is a continuation. Every exhale is a release. You were taught to do this before you had a name, and long after your name has faded, the rhythm will remain, written in tides, in light, in the memory of a moon that never needed to speak to be understood.